Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Jamie McMurray, Matt Kenseth, and yes, Kyle Larson have been eliminated from the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series playoffs. We'll tell you how it happened, as well as a preview of the third round and more, as Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by Race Review Online, Prime Sports Network, starts now. All right, it's the 24th of October, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and we are counting down as far as the races left for the 2017 season. The first big surprise, Kyle Larson is out after being pretty much in the top three all season in the Cup Series. So we'll talk about how that happened and who's left here on our show today. Let's welcome in my co-host for the show. He is the motorsports editor, the lead motorsports editor, actually, at Race Review Online, Eric Smith. Eric, good talking to you again.
Good. Thanks for having me. Good talking to you. And, crazy last round we had there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're going to get this. This is going to happen where we're going to have drivers like Kyle Larson who have been phenomenal all season. I mean, he starts the season off, Daytona 500 is Daytona 500, but he starts the season off with all those runner-ups and a win, like in his first 5 or 6 races to show everybody, that he's here. And then even since his win at Michigan, some more runner-ups, 3 more, a couple more wins. He starts the playoffs with 3 straight top 5s, 4 straight top 10s. And, all right, he has a mishap, which wasn't even his fault at Talladega when he gets fishtailed towards the end of the race. And then he has one big issue last week, and that's it. It's over. I mean, is this right? Are we doing this right?
Honestly, I was skeptical, of course, when this first, I think we touched on this last time about stage points. And honestly, by looking at, I took a kind of a deep dive into all the stage points and everything in between these rounds. And if you base off stage points, it's right. It's unfortunately right for Larson. Is it right as a grand scheme of things for the sport? I don't necessarily think so. I don't think it's fair for a driver to run that well pretty much consistently all year. He had 5 top 2 finishes in the first 6 races.
Yeah.
First 7 races.
Yeah.
He, as you said, had all top 5s in the first round, 4 in a row. Really running on top of his game, and then you get in this round, and he had 11 stage points at Charlotte, but finished 10th. So that hurt him a little bit. But then at Talladega and Kansas, obviously, he didn't score any stage points at all. And that's what hurt him. That if you look down at the end of the story here, he had 11 stage points for the whole round, and he missed the next round by 9 points. Jimmy Johnson got the last spot. He had 20 stage points. Well, 20 minus 11 is 9, and Larson lost out on 9 stage points, basically, advancing on, where Jimmy Johnson beat him by 9 points as far as stage points, and he beat him in 9 points in the standings. So that just goes to show you really where stage points are really going to be the key. It looks like, I guess, for the whole season, not just the regular season, that if you're not on your game at the beginning of the race and in the second stage of the race, that could be the difference between advancing onto a round or not. And how fair that is, I guess that would remain to be seen as far as get a kind of a sample size under a year or two under our belts. But he just basically flat out missed out because he blew his engine in the first stage. What would have happened if he finished in the top 5? Well, now all of a sudden he might have missed out on advancing the next round by a point or 2. Well, say he ran the second stage and finished in the top 10 of that stage, Kyle Larson advances along. So really, whenever you have a problem in the race, if you have it, you kind of have to hope it happens past the halfway point, because if it happens beforehand, you're missing out on stage points, which could then affect you moving along to the next round or not.
Yeah, I mean, it to me it's kind of confusing because you look and you see Eric Jones has what 143 and
Yes.
Logano's got 139 and Kyle's got 51. And it's like, okay, but Logano and Jones aren't anywhere near as good as Kyle Larson, and they have like almost 100 more stage points than him. So to me, it's like, well, it's pretty obvious then that it was like Kyle Larson and this team was like, you know what, it's almost like they're just too young and they can't really. I'm not worrying about stage points. I'm trying to develop as a driver here, and I'm just going to go out and try to win races, and that's what I'm going to try to do. I mean, because they've never been successful before. So I don't think you can worry about stage points when you're as young as Kyle Larson. Strategically, I don't think that's what you go into these races when you're not even when you haven't even made a name for yourself. Uh, so in one hand, okay, made my name for myself now this year. Now I'll know what to do next year as far as the stage point. Okay, and I get that, but still, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like we're trying to make something completely new out of this. That the stage points really did dictate whether Kyle Larson was going to be available to try to win a championship, and it's round two. I mean, we're not even in the third round. He didn't even make it to the third round. So it's becoming a major thing. Do you think the drivers? Do you think some of them really understood how major it was going to be?
I think so. I think from what everybody was saying in the garage at Kansas, this kind of hit them. They all kind of realized that, wow. I think everybody really that's in touch with the series, even if you're a casual fan and looking at the playoffs, it wasn't even talked about whether Larson would be eliminated at all. Most thought he would make it to the championship floor at Homestead. No one really had him not even making out of the round of 12. I mean, really, I guess to compare this to stick and ball sports, this would be the equivalent, I guess, of maybe like the New England Patriots or somebody going undefeated all regular season, not committing a turnover, and then in the second round of the playoffs, all of a sudden fumbling all over their feet. They're throwing interceptions, doing stuff they've never done before, and their season ends. And I guess you could throw a weather aspect in it, and they're not in the Super Bowl, and they had the best team all year. And is that fair or not? And that's kind of how you got to look at the NASCAR playoffs now. Is you could have the top 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds entering into the playoffs. You had a really good regular season, but now all of a sudden it's not even just finishes, it's stage points that are taking you out. And that's kind of where I've got a little problem with it, because he finished 10th and 13th in 2 of the races, and this guy's not moving along. And the only reason is stage points. And I don't know how fair that is. And like you said, he's a young guy, a young team. They're not necessarily racing for stage points, where you got veterans that like Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, where they know how to win. They know where they need to position themselves by the end of the race, that those guys are racing at stage points, just accumulating points. And that's the whole reason someone like Jimmy Johnson's moving along, and someone like Kyle Larson, who's been consistent all year, he's essentially going home. Rather, he's racing still, but he's eliminated, and that's a big loss. That's a big loss of the sport to have a young driver, because a lot of people were touting him as the next ambassador of the sport. He's the young gun. He's the guy coming along, and that's a big storyline out. Now all of a
Yeah.
sudden, he's not even talked about anymore.
Yeah, it's tough because yeah, good fresh blood, championship blood is always good, which is okay. And Martin Truex is also kind of new to being a championship driver if that happens, so that's nice. And you still have some guys that haven't won before that are still alive, and some young kids like Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott that are still alive. So that's nice. And look, I do get. And I'm okay with your comparison to the way that NASCAR now wants these playoffs to run like, where, hey, you know what? That's the way it is in the playoffs in every other sport. If you a single elimination too. I mean, and I think that's the one thing where if you are going to compare it to football, because that's like the only sport that does have a single elimination, and that's okay to do that. It is the stage points though that because I look at Eric Jones and I see because Eric Jones has been I mean the stage points for Eric Jones are to me and I haven't done any research on it, but I got to believe it's because that he's had a very good season, getting off to really good starts, but he hasn't been able to finish the job, and that's usually what happens with young drivers. I think Kyle Larson went through that, but should he be rewarded for that with that many stage points just because he did well in the beginning of the race and faltered at the end when it really matters? So maybe there's just maybe a little bit of a tweak here or there, which is always going to be the case as far as how you handle these things. I mean, I know I would prefer to see more points awarded. You see, I'm okay if they're going to keep the stage points, but why don't you give more points though for drivers that actually do finish the race first or second, that kind of thing. I'm not saying just giving an insurmountable amount, but I just think they should be given a little bit more points. And I think if you have more points for finishing first or second or third during the season, maybe some of this stuff wouldn't happen.
I agree. I definitely agree with that because really what they're doing is it's almost like you're getting rewarded for qualifying well because that's how Eric Jones is accumulating a lot of points because it seems like every week, and he's got Toyota power, he's around the top 10 in the qualifying results.
Okay.
A lot of times top 5, top 6. So he's just hanging around, and then his inexperience is hurting him there in the final half of the race.
Yeah.
And he's not getting the finishes. Where I look at Kyle Larson, for example, in the first round, he qualified 6th at Chicago, and he got stage points in the first 2 rounds. He qualified 2nd at Loudon, and he finished 2nd in the first stage. And he qualified 3rd at Dover, and he finished, looks like, 6th in the first stage, and he won the second stage. Well, his qualifying results in round 2 were 10th, 12th, and 13th, respectively. So just by him not qualifying up front, and a lot of these guys talk about how passing is so hard these days, especially up front, because all these cars are so equal. It's almost now like, are we rewarding points for qualifying almost? If you qualify in the top 10, are you now pretty much solidified your spot to get a stage points in the first round, which is fine, but to me, I kind of agree with you on the point. Maybe we give more points for the finishing order instead of giving, and I get where they had the points like last year where if you finish last, you get 1 point, you finish second to last, it just increases by 1 point.
Yeah.
But nobody's talking about that anymore. So if you want to go by that point system, I almost look at it, maybe you double it. Maybe instead of you finish last, you get 2 points. Then you go all the way up so you win, you double that, where now you maybe get 80 points for winning because Larson was finishing 10th and 13th in the first 2 races of this round. That could have been enough to advance them along.
Yeah.
Because I look at, I broke down even the first stage or the first round in all the stages. The top 12 out of the 16 playoff drivers, the top 12 advanced. The bottom 4, Kurt Busch had 3 stage points for the whole playoffs. Newman had 0. Austin Dillon had 0, and Casey Kane had 0. Well, they're done. They didn't advance, and that must have been stage points. Well, let's look at the second round. Kenseth, McMurray, Larson, Truex, and Stenhouse were in the bottom 5. 4 of them are done. So that basically that's a good enough sample size for me to tell me so this round we're taking 4 to Homestead. Well, it sounds like if you're 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th as far as stage points go, you're going to be eliminated. So that then in turn, if you ask me, would be you kind of have to step your game up qualifying and start up front because this is getting to crunch time. You can't afford to start really 15th on back and be a playoff driver, but your competition start inside the top 10 because you're giving up points at that point. And that would be the other question for another day is that fair? Are we really going to crown a champion based off of stage points at this point?
Yeah. I guess we'll find out how it all ends. I mean, you do have the strategy too. We saw on Sunday regarding some of the drivers that decided, well, I'm going to stay out in the last couple of laps and get cheap points. I mean, what was it?
Yes.
Hamlin? Did Hamlin do that? Where he,
Hamlin and Johnson did.
yeah, they basically. I mean, they didn't do anything. They just stole significant points.
Yep.
And
that's where we're going to now, almost. That's kind of where now it's the strategy comes along. Qualify up front, at least position yourself the top 10, and then run the second stage as a strategy that guys may start pitting, but if you've got nothing to lose, maybe run your fuel, stretch your fuel, and steal some points. And could we really have a winner get to Homestead based off somebody stretching their points in a second stage? And right now, the answer looks like it could be yes.
You see,
and would that be fair?
I know when they talked about this, they pumped this. They tried to pump this up, and you still get the announcers every so often, and it's boring. Where they'll say, "Oh yeah, look how exciting the end of these stages are. They're battling for these points, and it's really exciting." And it's like, okay, yeah, it's really thrilling. So, but that's what the goal was they wanted to make the beginning of the races, the middle of the races, a little bit more drama filled, so we're not kind of just waiting for the end of the races. They wanted to make the beginning and the middle have an impact. Okay, so, but I think as a fan, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing how you're like, is it that much of an impact where it's where you've said as a fan, oh, I love these stages so much, and they've impacted the sport so much in a positive way that we're going to impact the championship that much. I don't see it. I just don't.
Honestly, I haven't noticed a lot. You might notice in the TV. Unfortunately, they obviously only cover a lot of times the front of the field, and there is a little more intense racing going along between maybe 8th and 12th at times.
Okay.
But it's not enough to really move the needle. My thing is I was wondering when NASCAR made this, are you basically saying your cars are too equal and not good enough to pass one another, so we got to throw a wrinkle in here to add stage points to try to make it basically manufactured? We want to see if we can create some more passing. And my response back to them is, why don't you work on your cars?
Yeah.
Why don't you make your cars able to pass more?
Yep.
And maybe shorten the races? Because back in the day, a 400 or 500 mile race, that was basically a test of man versus machine versus track. Not every car can make it 500 miles or 400 miles.
Okay.
They weren't durable. Every driver, they weren't in shape like they were now. It may have been a test, a grueling test to drive a car for 500 miles. And can you handle a track? Well, nowadays, these drivers are all crazy in shape. They work out 5, 6, 7 days a week. They're racing 500 miles doesn't affect them. On an IndyCar side, I talked to Juan Pablo Montoya during the before the Indy 500 one race, and I asked him that question: how far can you race? Obviously, this is a 500-mile race, but is it grueling anymore to you as far as the G-forces? And he said, no, I barely even break a sweat. I'm more in shape now that I could probably run 2 of these things.
All right.
So I started asking other drivers in NASCAR and IndyCar, and they've all said the same thing. And I asked them, how far can you go? And they've all admitted we could probably go 1,000 miles without really being that taxing on our bodies. And they all said their cars, we all see their car. Obviously, Larson had a misfortune with an engine blown, but how often do you really see engines blow on the top teams these days? These cars all can make it 400 or 500 miles easily.
Yeah.
So maybe we just shorten the races, and then you don't get these cars and drivers just riding around in the middle, which is essentially why NASCAR made this rule. Let's stop drivers from just trying to get by to the end. Let's maybe manufacture something here. Well, they can't pass and they're trying to ride around. Well, maybe we'll add points to it. Maybe that'll make the intensity ramp up a little more. And I haven't seen it really ramp up that much more, because the drama I think they were trying to create was that 11th place driver, maybe they'll spin the 10th place driver out just to get a playoff point.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's not happening.
Well, at least not yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Maybe we'll see it at Phoenix, the last race. Well, but it's the common fan. Do they really care about that? It just seems like another wrinkle, just like these penalties they had this past weekend. It's just like there's too many rules going on here, and we're eliminating good drivers that have been around all season long because of a stage point. And is this really the direction we want to go, or should we maybe look at shortening these races? That way they're getting done within a couple hours. That way the attention span of the common fan, people don't want to sit around in front of a TV for 3-4 hours anymore. Maybe we shorten these races. It makes the intensity ramp up, and then we can eliminate these stage points, and we can work on the cars and create passing, and maybe we get an intense race all the way through, and that can keep people's attention all the way through.
I mean,
which sounds like with these rule changes, that's what they're trying to get to.
I mean, isn't there a way to, I don't understand why they want to make sure that the tires, like they're always talking about making sure that the tires are durable, and that was always a complaint over the years, because you'd see drivers, complaining about whatever, you get flats and wrecks and stuff, and the way I'm thinking about it is well, why would they want to fix that? Why wouldn't they want there to be, because if the cars aren't going to break down, then the only thing that maybe can break down are the tires. So I remember watching a race, I forget what it was, a couple of years ago. And I was watching, I forget where it was, but I watched this race, and they were going the distance on the tires, and they were slipping and sliding all over the place. You had driver A and driver B trying to hold off each other. You could tell their tires were done, and it was exciting. And it's like they don't want that for some reason. I don't get it. Why don't you want? It's like Indianapolis. Indianapolis was the best race of the year. It was the best finish of the year, because everybody kept wrecking at the end of the race because they couldn't control their cars. That's what we want to see: uncontrollable cars at the end of races, so it makes these finishes fun. But they eliminate it. I don't get it.
I don't either. I could see where you'd want it at least durable, where you don't want a tire blow and somebody shooting to the wall. But there is a thing they can work with. It's called tire degradation, to where they fall off, and
Okay.
they essentially, basically, your tire is losing grip as the run goes on.
Uh-huh.
I would like to see more races like that.
Yes.
If you see the tires fall off, because, like we've talked about, these drivers they're well in shape. The physicality of the race isn't affecting them. The car running 400 or 500 miles, it's not affecting it. And if you have tires that aren't falling off, and these drivers are all good enough to be here, they're off the top level. So if you can control a car going 180, 190 miles an hour, you got pretty good car control.
Sure.
So why don't we make it harder? That would be, to me, that would create more passing, because then you're really going to separate the men from the boys, the guys that can control. But I think that's the main point NASCAR is missing out on, that let's not make these cars easier to drive. Let's make them harder to drive, and let's really separate these drivers.
Yep.
To really separate the good ones from the bad.
Yeah, we're so far off. I know they're trying, and I know they try so many things all the time, and they're pretty quick with making changes, and I really applaud them for that. They're not always right, but at least they try. But they're not seeing it right now. They're not, the attempts they're making they're not right, and they've got to, and they'll figure it out. But it may take another few years of trying this and trying that, but hopefully they listen to the right people. I'm glad that Denny Hamlin and I think even we've heard Kevin Harvick before. I'm glad that they're speaking out. I'm glad that they're saying stuff about, especially I think everybody realizes, and I think Hamlin might have been the one that talked about sponsorship and how that impacts the sport so much. And I've talked to CJ about this many times. I really think that if NASCAR wants to take that next step, they have to just figure. Look, you have to stop with the way things used to be, or we're still doing it the way it's done with sponsorship, and you got to get over that. And Hamlin's right. No more sponsorship. You want a sponsorship, that just adds to a company's marketing, and you can pay more people to hire them and to sell merchandise. And so the people who own the company get richer. And I have no problem with that. And then the drivers can make more money, and they're free agents, and they can go where they want. But I'm fine with that. But it should, they should make sure that it's sort of like some sort of even playing field financially, Screw the even playing field for the cars, but make it an even playing field financially. So you get these drivers that aren't even still, they're not even driving in Cup because they can't get a ride. Or as he said, and we've complained about this for the last couple of years, drivers like Paul Menard driving in the sport just because he can get a sponsor. That's not right.
No, and that's I've been against that for the last several years. Is yeah, like a Paul Menard or nothing against her, but a Danica Patrick, just like a pretty face with money is taking a seat from somebody that might have talent that doesn't have any money.
Yes.
Like if I had, I think it's reported 12 million basically a year that you need now to get a Cup seat. If I had $12 million sitting here in my pocket and I don't have any racing experience, but I walk into a boardroom or a conference room with the Cup owner and say, hey, I've got $12 million I'll give you for this year if you put me in the seat.
Yeah.
They're probably going to look at you.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's not fair. Can you imagine the Dodgers, I guess they're playing the World Series tonight, so we'll use them as an example. They've got a starting first baseman, but can you imagine some guy from the stands coming and saying, I know that you're paying that guy $12 million a year, but I've got 15. I'll pay you. Can I play first base? And that team taking it. And it's like, it's almost pay for play is what it's getting to be.
Yep.
And why are we, instead of being a professional sport, you almost seem kind of amateur, don't you? If you're having a pay for play, it's like, let me bring my money to come play.
Yes.
I'd rather see the guys with the most talent. And you look at a guy like Matt Kenseth, the perfect example. He doesn't have any money sponsorship backing for next year.
Yeah.
He's a past champion. He's won the Daytona 500 twice. And you're telling me he can't get a ride?
Yeah.
But there's other guys that, like a Paul Menard is going to be with Wood Brothers, who's aligned with Penske. But a guy like Matt Kenseth can't get a ride? How is that fair? And it's not like Matt Kenseth is old by any stretch of the imagination. He's only 43, so we can't say the 40-year-olds are old when you had guys in the last century, the 90s and early 2000s, they were in their 50s still racing. So these guys if you compare them to the past greats, they still have another 5-10 years left in them, but they're getting passed over for a younger guy with money. That doesn't make any sense. And that's the direction the sport's going. And I think that's what Hamlin was trying to say. Like, look, we've got an identity crisis on our hands we're pushing out drivers that have big names, but they don't have any financial backing. And we're getting these younger guys who aren't proven and basically handing them the keys of the reins. And that's where NASCAR's got a problem, because you look at this year, they're about to lose Dale Jr. Last year, they lost Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Carl Edwards. It's like, and Jimmy Johnson basically said he doesn't want to race much past 2020. So you look at 3 years down the road, NASCAR could be without Jimmy Johnson, Matt Kenseth, Dale Jr., Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Carl Edwards. And who's left? Who's there that they can take that spot other than a guy that brought in the paycheck? And that's where I kind of circle back into a guy like Kyle Larson and how big that is of losing him.
Yeah.
Because you got a 25-year-old kid or 23 or 24, however old is now, that's now on the sidelines. He's not going to get talked about the rest of the year. He just lost Target. They're trying to find a sponsor next year.
That's crazy. That just shows you how crazy that is. I mean, Target's been with them for years, and now they've got a championship driver, and Target's not going to sponsor the car anymore. I mean, those sort of things, just as a fan, you're like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. But that's the way it is. So it's, here's
another wrinkle. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'd say here's another wrinkle to throw into things is, again, with this whole playoff system and sponsorship, and you got a guy like Chase Elliott, who we're talking with this playoffs and postseason and winning races, and really NASCAR wants to reward you for winning. And you win races, you move along. He has never won a race in his Cup career. Granted, he's only in his second year. I wrote about this week. I have a strong case I can make for him to make it to Homestead without ever winning a race. How would that happen? What happens if Chase Elliott makes it to Homestead and he doesn't win a race this round, and say something happens, say the other three drivers at Homestead, one guy cuts a tire and wreck, and another guy has a pit road. say Chase Elliott finishes second in Homestead and he wins the championship.
Yeah.
Do you really want to crown a champion that has a career of 0 wins?
That
Is
you
that
know
how
what?
you wanna?
I'm rooting for that. That's what I
am
want.
too, to be honest with you.
Yep. That would be
would
great.
take this whole system and basically say we need to tweak some things here.
Yep.
Because what would happen? What would happen if a 21-year-old kid, he's only 21, and Napa is only signed through next year? So what if he wins, and what if Napa says next year we don't want to come back? We want to put our money elsewhere, which I would never tell a business.
Sure.
You should spend your money here. So if Napa wants to go, so be it. Not saying they will, not saying they won't, but what if he's a 21-year-old kid, wins a championship, has never won a race, and then he loses his sponsor? Then what happens?
Yeah.
This is basically what Denny Hamlin is kind of saying in a nutshell.
Well, and I'm glad someone's speaking out. So, and let's go Chase Elliott. Don't win, but win the championship. We'd all be happier for it. And maybe we'd get some of these changes because, look, I've also said a lot over the last few years that maybe another simple way to change things, but they're not going to do it because it's way too expensive. And they're going to have to think about doing this anyway sooner or later. And they got to start building more racetracks. I mean, these racetracks, I mean, everybody's building stadiums in every sport. I mean, if you don't have a stadium in all these 4 major sports, like a new stadium, I mean, you're like a pariah, like the Oakland A's or something. Everybody has a new stadium, but where are the new tracks? There aren't any. And with all the new technology and all the changes with racing, I mean, you should have, if you're not keeping up with the times, then I think that's part of why we're also, I think changing whether it's the surface or widening the lanes, whatever that could make the driving better and keep up with the new technology. But again, I know that's an expensive proposition, but we've just explained and talked about all the other answers, all the other things that they could try before they even have to think about doing that, even though that's something they should eventually do anyway. But there are a lot of different examples that we just talked about that they hopefully will start to will start to implement. And look, it's with everything going on in all these other sports, there is such an opportunity for NASCAR to look 5 years from now and say, you know what, we could really grow this sport tremendously. I mean, it's never going to change. Guys are always going to love driving fast cars and even watching people drive fast cars. But you got to do it right. You got to keep them entertained. And they just haven't kept us entertained. And watching Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Busch, and almost Kyle Larson, of course, battle it out first, second, and third all year. I mean, Martin Truex Jr. couldn't. I mean, he gets penalized in the race on Sunday, and he still wins. I mean, he won every 1.5 mile racetrack that was. I forget what makes those tracks similar, but those similar 1.5 mile racetracks, he's won them all.
Yep.
I mean, okay, that's not parity. That's not really what we're looking for to perk up the drama and to make things fun. So guys like Chase Elliott do win races. I mean, we want Chase Elliott to win more races. We want to see more drivers win more races, and but we'll see. We'll see if Martin Truex Jr. can win a championship because he's been the best driver all year, but didn't work out for Kyle Larson.
That's exactly right. And looking at the next round, and I previewed that on the website this week, that really Martin's got to kind of take notice with what happened with Kyle Larson, because if you look at the 3 tracks in this round, Truex and 2 of them has not fared well at those at all. And yes, he's got 69 playoff points. Yes, he leads the bubble by 52 points. But if he keeps committing errors, like last round, he only had 10 stage points. And part of that, which Talladega, I get, he kind of rode in the back. He had nothing to race for because he already won. But he didn't get any stage points that day. Charlotte, he committed a mistake early. He got 0 stage points. Chicagoland, the first race of the first round, committed a penalty earlier. He only got 1 stage point. So Kansas, he just had 2 penalties, or he had a penalty early for the restart violation, and then in the second stage he had a loose wheel. he got 3 stage points all day. So,
but he's winning the races. That's why
winning the race.
yeah, that's what's getting him over the hump. So,
yeah. But in this round, I question whether he could even win. Like at Martinsville, his average finishing spot there is 20.39. So these other tracks he's winning races on because he's good there. But there's only 1.5 mile track in this round. So where he's got to take notice is if he messes up, like Martinsville, if you have a restart violation or a loose wheel, instead of losing one lap like you did at Kansas, you may lose 2 or 3, and that may be too much for him to make up. And say he finishes 15th or worse. Well, he can lean on those playoff points, but if all the other guys get a bunch of stage points, well, that gap just shrunk dramatically. Well, Phoenix, his average finish is 17.57. Same thing. Say he has another costly error. Well, it's not as easy to make up for it there. Well, now those playoff points that he's got, now they're virtually gone. And if everybody else gets stage points, well, that basically makes it he has to perform well at Texas, which is 1.5 miles, which he's won 4 in a row. So to me, does that become a must-win for him because of what just happened to Kyle Larson? Is Truex not immune now? It basically Larson kind of just changed my mindset and basically the whole NASCAR garage's mindset is, whoa, hold on a second here. He going into that last race, Kyle Larson had a 29-point advantage, and he actually was out by 9 points. So basically, he just lost 38 points. So Truex has a 52-point advantage. So that if Larson lost 39 or 38 in one race, those 52 points can be shrunk quickly.
Yeah.
Then are we talking that in a few weeks? Is it fair that Truex and Kyle Larson are sitting on the sidelines at Homestead?
Well, in your preview this week, you talk about the possibility that we might get some lights finally. It's another thing we talked about last time. No night racing in the playoffs. I also don't like the fact that, I really think that they should, look, we know we've talked about the whole thing with what time they should be starting these races and maybe having nighttime races. And look, I understand people got to go to work on Mondays and stuff, but you know what? There's Sunday night football, and every time there's these World Series games or other big games and other big sports, they always have them at all sorts of late times, and people have to get up the next day and you deal with it. So in football season, when they're dealing with these playoffs, I don't know why they don't. See, they're putting these races in the middle of 10 games going on a Sunday. Why don't you put it on at night on a Sunday night when you're only competing with one game? Give the fans an alternative, or start it a little later. You're starting at 3:00. That's at the end of 1:00 football games, going into your 4:00 games. It's just a very weird. I actually kind of like the 3:00 only because of the fact that I get an opportunity to watch more of the 1:00 games for me, and then I can go ahead and finish watching the NASCAR that I've DVR'd after I'm done watching all the 1:00 games. But everybody doesn't have a DVR, so you have to pick and choose. So scheduling as well is something that is an easy kind of switch that hopefully they could figure out. But I'd like to see maybe, we'll find out whether or not we get some lights. Is that a definite? You think we're going to get some like the last hour possibly dark?
Yeah, I would say so because it's a 3:00 start. Well, that's when NBCSN picks it up. So usually, I haven't seen the green flag times yet. NASCAR hasn't officially announced those. So usually you're talking probably 3:15, 3:18-ish. Usually they start those. And Martinsville could go between 3 and 4 hours. That's a 500-mile short track race.
Okay.
And cautions are going to breed cautions. And so you're looking, if it goes, say, 3 hours, you're looking at after 6, probably 6:15 at the earliest that race ends. Or it could go after 7. I'm not real sure what sunset is there in Martinsville, but I would think it's probably got to be around 6:30-ish. So I think there's a good chance that race is going to end under the lights, which they've never had a night cup race there. So I would venture to say that one should end under the lights. Texas the next week, same kind of scenario. It's not going to start till after 3.
Okay.
So that race usually ends at night anyways, the playoff race there. So I would think these next 2 races, they're going to end under the lights, which would be good. But then again, you have any rain delay. Say it rains a little bit in Martinsville, having those lights help because now you can run that race at night.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure weather-wise what the temperature. I mean, you're talking Virginia, October.
It's a little cool.
Happen.
It's a little cool. It's probably like 50, 40
way,
at night. Yeah.
Yeah, which they would still race. That wouldn't affect them racing. I don't know how comfortably for a fan in the stands, but you're going to be there anyways. I don't think that's going to affect whether, it's going to be 40. I'm not going to go.
Okay.
They're still going to go. Texas, you don't have to worry about that. You're in Texas if it gets night, which that race last year, it was rain delayed, and they did run that at night, the whole thing under the lights. So that is a very big possibility that both of those, they help with rainouts, but I agree with your assessment. 3 o'clock is kind of an odd start. I personally kind of like it too, because if I'm not at the track, I could catch a 1 o'clock game and I'm not missing anything by the time that race goes green and by the time that football game's over. But it's still an odd time because by the time that race is over, you're ending right in the middle of a lot of people on the East Coast, their dinner plans.
That's true too.
People may leave. They may leave and go out to dinner. It's a Sunday. They may get together with family to go out to dinner. They might have family come over.
Yep.
They're probably not watching that race. They might have to DVR it for later. Like you said, maybe they don't have a DVR. Where ending at dinner time just does not seem like a good time to me. My alternative at these days, I agree with you, maybe running on a Sunday night. You're only going against one football game.
Yeah.
And you're only going against 2 fan bases. I think if your team isn't playing Sunday night football, you may be wanting to watch something else anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
You got the race on.
Yeah.
Or my other alternative would be if they could swallow we're making all kinds of changes already anyways with the sport, with stages and playoff points. And I would almost explore racing on Saturdays. You're really only going against college football, and you got different fan bases out there, and I get that. But I think you might get stronger ratings. You're not going against the juggernaut NFL. What if you race on Saturday nights? A lot of college football games are played during the day. You're going against a couple primetime games. But again, that's fan base driven of that certain market where you're not really going against a whole lot if you just move it to Saturdays and you can run on a Saturday night. Say the race doesn't end until 11 o'clock or midnight on the East Coast. What's it matter? You're off work the next day anyways.
Yeah, that's
that gives
true.
you a full day to recuperate, and you're not missing any work on a Monday. So that's something I would take a look at in the future, because prime time is where you get a lot of ratings anyways. Running Sunday prime time, Saturday prime time, or moving some races to a Saturday. And like a Martinsville this weekend, you can experiment running that on a Saturday night. You've never done that before. And now you got a playoff race in prime time on Saturday night, and you can get it on an NBC, which would be a big network, and maybe lead into Saturday Night Live, in which maybe you get the occasional fan turning in to watch Saturday Night Live and make, what's this race?
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, we got all sorts of changes, and hopefully they'll start paying attention, because they've got a great opportunity to change the sport and to make it a whole lot more fun for the fans, and hopefully we'll be here to see it happen real soon. Eric, we will talk to you again real soon. Not sure, we may be doing a show next week to catch up on what's going on now that every race is that much more important with only 4 to go. So looking forward to talking to you next time. And of course, we're posting your reports at primesportsnetwork.com, but you've got a whole bunch of other reports available, including the previews of the races and such. And you'll have also an update after what? Is it usually right after or before a practice, or is it after the first practice or 2 sessions? How do you do that each week?
Yeah, usually. So I'll have usually my weekly updates, and then once practice starts, which this weekend is on a Saturday. It's actually just a 2-day show, so the Cup guys won't be practicing on Friday. They'll have 2 practices on Saturday. So at that point, I will have a recap kind of the 2 practices, but my main report will be I'll have a favorites list, so your 5 favorites for that respective race. So I do that every weekend. So usually it's after qualifying, but this weekend's different because they're actually going to qualify the day of the race. But usually most weekends they'll practice once on Friday and they qualify afterwards. And that's when usually the top 5 favorites come out. And I looked it up the last few weeks, the top, out of my 5 favorites, the 4 of the 5 have finished in the top 5. Most of them have won.
Okay.
One of those 5 have won the race. So usually if you want to, if people out there, I know they do fantasy NASCAR, or if you go bet in Vegas or anything, if you pay attention to that, you've got a good shot of at least getting a winner. Usually they're pretty spot on. I put a lot of research into it.
Okay.
I take average finish, what they've done at that track, what they've done at the season, what they've done in similar tracks this season, what they've done in certain situations. Pretty much compute it all together, and I get that list. So I also take effect of practice, not just single lap speed. They give me a five lap average, 10 lap average, and where they're starting the race. And I can kind of compute that all into one and come up with my 5 there. So I should have that up Saturday afternoon. Obviously, qualifying won't be involved since they're not even qualifying until looks like about 2.5 hours before the race.
Okay.
So that's kind of a short time frame to get people out 5 favorites. So I'll do that Saturday, and then the next week at Texas, I think they get back to normal. So that'll be on Fridays from there on out.
All right. Sounds good, Eric. We'll talk to you real soon. Appreciate it. And again, you can follow Eric on Twitter at Eric_Race Review. And, of course, go to the website, racereviewonline.com. Thanks, Eric. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. And, oh, by the way, Eric, congratulations on the new baby coming.
Thank you. Thank you. We're excited. Baby number 2. So, he should be here Thursday.
That's awesome. So when we talk again, you'll be father number 2. Father times 2.
Yep, father times 2.
Thanks, Eric.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, that's Eric Smith. CJ Radoon will join us again as well next week. So don't forget to check back with us. Again, like I said, we'll try to be here for the next several weeks leading up till the championship at Homestead. We'll also get Kenny Bruce on from NASCAR.com. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by Race Review Online on the Prime Sports Radio Network.